Yeah, another great question. I think my first one is talk to someone that's done it before.
And I always encourage them to be comfortable, to be very comfortable when they hear a no.
I think the last piece of advice I'd have is understand that adaptation is required.
Kevin, let me firstly thank you for accepting my invitation and being with us. I'll give you a very small introduction of myself and why I started this program in the first place, so on and so forth. Then, one second, sorry. Yeah. So, why I wanted to start this program in the first place, so on and so forth. I'll just give you a heads up, Kevin. Kevin, I have been a serial entrepreneur for nearly 13 plus years. I have been in the space of medical technologies, and then I have shifted myself into education technologies from there onwards. And right now, I strongly believe, Kevin, that this is high time that we pass this baton on to the next generation, to the young entrepreneurs, because I see a lot of youngsters being motivated to create startups, take the baton, and then to take to the next level. I'm very passionate about it, and I'm a very passionate entrepreneur when it comes to giving back to the community. And I believe that it's high time that we share this knowledge so that they could take these points, maybe use them down the line, so on and so forth. That was the total expectation, and that is why I honestly started Entrepreneur X, Kevin. So thank you once again for accepting my invitation, because we have never met earlier. You just connected,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy to have you on board. So that being the start, Kevin, I would love to know a little bit about you. You can have a small. I went through your profile, but I would love to hear from you
Yeah.
your passion and your areas, please. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that really resonated with me when you reached out because throughout my career, I have supported a lot of early stage companies and, before starting my own company. And I love to give back, whether it's a startup that's not familiar with hardware or someone interested in entrepreneurship. So, first of all, I think it's great what you're doing. And a little myself, grew up in the US, started with a business background, actually outside of manufacturing. But my first internship was with an injection molding company doing about $1.2 billion in global sales.
Okay.
And I was very fortunate that after the internship, they asked if I was interested in joining a management training program, essentially learning the business. It was a 2-year program where I was going to be on the manufacturing floor. I was going to go to China to learn the operations there. Basically, everything I needed to know before I could go in front of a customer to talk about, what it meant to work with this company called Nipro for injection molding. So, I had my formal education in business, but then, my career really started engaging with engineers and designers and, on the ground in factories and worked with them for a number of years. They ended up getting acquired by Jabil, which is the third largest electronic manufacturer in the world, where I was starting to work with clients to not only look at the mechanicals and the plastics and injection molded parts, but how do you build a complete product integrating electronics? And for me, it was quite exciting just working with bigger brands like Amazon and Google and, some of the bigger tech companies to see not only how they approach innovation, but also behind the scenes, what does that mean in terms of, taking a product that's never been done before and launching potentially millions of units. So that's how my career started to evolve. And then I got an opportunity within Jabil, the product development firm that they acquired. And within that product development firm, I actually came to Hong Kong and spent 5 years with them, helping to scale the business. And this is when I started to get more exposure into startups. Basically, from the concept phase, what do you do from an idea to getting ready for manufacturing? And so that was, again, probably the first 10, 12 years of my career. And then I decided to move on to an early stage investor called Brink, running some of the largest accelerator programs in Asia, investing in global pre-seed to seed startups. And some of them were focused on hardware, but they expanded into food technology, uh, sustainability, Web3, and blockchain, a bunch of different categories. So for me, it was a good way for me to get more and more exposure to startups, what investors are looking for, and just engaging with projects at the early stage, seeing what's working, what isn't working. And then that led me into starting my own business, which is Zaffinity, based in Hong Kong. And more recently, I just added 2 partners to a US-based entity called Brightlink. And essentially, both of these companies, and more primarily Brightlink, is looking at everything I've learned over the years. And a big part of it is that in hardware, I see a need for flexible development and manufacturing solutions. There's companies out there that already cater to the big brands that need to manufacture millions of units. But how does a startup or entrepreneur navigate, building without having the right resources to hire a full-time engineering staff? Or who can they go to that they can trust for that service? Because, from my experience, a lot of times I actually get introduced to opportunities too late. It's when a founder entrepreneur reaches out and says, hey, I've spent, $100,000 with XYZ company and it's not working. What do I do? and I always try to help as much as I can. But the problem is, in those situations, what I can't do is I can't take your money back. Right? I can't take back what you've done the past 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So in an abbreviated version, that's a little bit of my background and how I've gone to where I am today in my career.
Kevin, why I just was so passionate to initiate this discussion is, now I was an IT graduate by default, but the passion was on electronics, and then
Yep.
we came into manufacturing of the initial company was into manufacturing of medical products, and I started that initiative with my team here in Sri Lanka, and to date, I still remember the nightmare that I had to go through when it comes to selecting of the components, ordering them online, getting them tested, the wait time on logistics, and then once that is actually not working, you throw that away, then you start ordering another component, you bring that in. And I still recall the effort that I had to put to make sure that I was able to put the final product in place. And I think having this discussion with you is very timely and will resonate a lot with my personal experience as well, Kevin. Kevin, to dive into this session, I have a bit of, let's say, a lined up questioning so that I could actually pick your brain specifically into this. Now, given that you have given your experience in the hardware development as well as gathering up the resources from the MVP prototype to product. That's how I would like to put it. I mean, that's where your expertise would come in handy. Now, if you take for the Asian market, for example, Kevin, I'm talking about the South Asian market, which is Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, so on and so forth. To be very honest, if you are an entrepreneur who is trying to build something which is a physical and a hardware device, it's very natural for them to come and face a barricade due to the lack of resources within that region. So it's very natural. Yep. We reach out to China, we reach out to Hong Kong. Sometimes we import some microprocessors from USA, Texas Instruments, which is like the largest manufacturer. They bring semiconductors, I use them. So that has been the the chain and the procedure so far. And when it's an entrepreneur who is trying to build it from scratch, it's very different from an entrepreneur who is starting a software-based business. It's day and night, Kevin. And yes. The worst part, Kevin, is there is no. I would say there is very limited. There's a very limited learning curve. Especially to hardware entrepreneurs who are building products, because especially in our region, because nobody had tried it out earlier. It's very limited people who had actually had the experience in that case. So for an entrepreneur who is starting who is planning to start up, planning to create a startup in the field of a hardware, that is to trying to build something. Kevin, in your experience, if you can list me like one, two, three, Pramadi, these are the things I would do right now in 2025. What would they be, Kevin?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's packed, right? There's so many layers, when we talk about hardware, and I think one of the first things is, again, thinking very thoughtfully about what it is you want to build, right? And who are the potential buyers? Who are you marketing to? What kind of market? Because I mean, I use Apple as an example. Apple has very high market share in a number of countries where incomes are traditionally higher. But for low income regions, even though it could be a great product, it's not the right product for that region or that demographic. So, I think really understanding who you're building for and trying to think thoughtfully about what you're building before spending what funding or money you have is absolutely important. The second thing I'd say, having been here in Hong Kong and Asia for 15 years now, most of the time people are not reinventing the wheel in the traditional sense.
Correct.
There's usually some type of product that's similar. And I have a great example where I have a client that's based in San Francisco a few months ago. He said, I have this great idea for a novel smartphone.
Okay.
And I have some funding, not enough to create a brand new smartphone, but it was then my job to work with him to understand, okay, what kind of suppliers have products or smartphones that are similar to what you want to build,
Okay.
and how can we adapt an existing product instead of recreating something completely new. And I think that's one thing that I always encourage is understanding how you can do it more efficiently. Because the reality is, starting from scratch, although in your mind you feel like you need to, there's so many factories, so many capabilities, so many products out there. If you can find a factory already doing something similar, not only are you going to de-risk the process, but you're going to save time and money as well. So, for me, those are the things that I'm typically looking at, and encouraging for founders to really think about at the early stages.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, because rather than reinventing the wheel, like you said, sometimes if you are able to do some minor tweaks to an existing model, that could be a game changer, Kevin. Because I've seen products like that. They just look up the product and say, okay, why don't you fix that patch? And that product takes off like nothing over time. I've
Yeah.
witnessed it firsthand, like you correctly said. That's very true. Kevin, just to look at the ecosystems as well as the friendliness of the entrepreneurial nature in the Asian region, as well as how it differs to the Hong Kong as well as the Chinese origin. To dig deep a little into that, do you think that the existing entrepreneurial ecosystem towards the Hong Kong, the Chinese markets are far more advanced in compared to the, I would say, compared to the Central Asian as well as to the Western civilization? I mean, I'm talking about access to resources, access to funding, access to build from a concept to MVP to prototype to product. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
So uh, I think it's quite interesting, and this is definitely maybe more of my own personal experience for sure. I don't have any data to back it up,
Yeah.
but what I've seen gradually is actually a shift more in the Hong Kong region in terms of startup investment away from hardware, even though the access with China, right, and all these engineering powerhouses and factories, I see more of a focus on, financial technologies and uh, more software based products. I don't actually get exposure to a lot of companies that regionally are getting funded for hardware here, unless I'd say maybe some of the exceptions are in maybe like biotech or maybe some medical technologies, um, where I think in other regions you might have some more interest in hardware based investments in other regions, but it's I don't think that there's a huge advantage from a fundraising standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I think the advantage is definitely language, because there is that potential language barrier for some of the companies that have those expertises in China, but aren't great in English or other languages. Um, and understanding of the culture and how to do business, the nuances of that, there's definitely an advantage. But other than that, I think more and more the playing field is getting leveled for people that want to build hardware, whether it's Central Asia, whether it is, the US or Europe, because these these walls are being broken down where, 10, 15 years ago, trying to get things done in China, even just the communication barrier, the technology, just like we're using right now, having video calls was not that easy and connections aren't great. So I think as technology has evolved, it's kind of opened it up so that people do have access to more resources, access direct to factories and not necessarily middlemen that are going to make it more difficult for you to be successful. And I think there are those companies again that only focus on high volume, but more and more there's factories that are building models to support high mix, low volume, or in general just supporting smaller clients. So I'm not sure if that answers your question in total, but these are just some of the things that I'm seeing.
Right. I think it matches a lot of the points that I actually wanted, Kevin. Kevin, are you by any chance located at the cyberport in Hong Kong?
Uh, I am not, but I've worked with them very closely. I've also worked very closely with the Hong Kong Science Park on a number of programs previously.
Right. I was visiting the Hong Kong cyberport. You have a startup ecosystem there. I was there about 2 years back. I met the head of entrepreneurship there. We hosted the Asia Pacific ICT Awards there, and
Yes.
my company was providing the technology to live stream the presentations all the way from Hong Kong to all the other nations. So,
Amazing.
we were there firsthand, and I witnessed the ecosystem. We stayed there for quite some time, and I mean, to be honest, the environment as well as the access to resources was fascinating. And from where I came from, and in compared to the ease of access, you say whether it's the resources or whether it's the infrastructure, it's a total different state there. So I was so pleased to have something like that. And to be honest, Kevin, I wanted to eventually, the expectation of this thought process and of this program alone is to try and see whether if I could maybe build something similar in this region. I mean, that's what I really wanted to, because I think there is plenty of room for entrepreneurs to come on board, uh, if such an environment is actually put in place. That's my long term game plan. I mean, that's what I really want to. Let's see if it happens.
Yeah.
Kevin, to pick your brain on this particular matter. Now it's 2025. It's over 2026, and right now the world is driving on AI, and uh, people would bet on it with the eyes closed right now. And I just read a couple of articles yesterday, and OpenAI is going for an IPO which is going to be worth about $1 trillion at the next
Yeah.
year. And they have a project called Stargate, which they are trying to invest heavily to have that AI driven architecture built in US. Now, when the entire world is tagging on to the rat race of AI, when entrepreneurs who are coming up in the world are trying to build something of hardware in nature. The reason I'm trying to bring the hardware narrative is because, Kevin, I believe your expertise would resonate on that particular area, because I'm also a very passionate hardware entrepreneur. And I've
Yeah.
seen the problems the entrepreneurs are facing. That's why I just try to direct the questions always into that kind of line of thinking, Kevin. Now,
Yeah.
here in 2026, let's say 2027, so on and so forth, if an entrepreneur is trying to build something, and if his innovation has a particular modular unit, which is a hardware component, Kevin, in
Mhm.
your experience, if he needs to get that implemented as soon as possible, which will complement his project deployment, how would he go by? Do you think it would be ideal for him to outsource that component to a place like China? Because in China you have entities like Siege Studio, where you have incubators where you could stay there, you could print it with CNC machines, so on and so forth. Like, would that be the way to go forward, Kevin? Because rather than focusing on that, do you think the world is speed enough to get what we want at a speed of phase because the technology is there?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things that are also shifting, not just AI, but other technologies and companies that are helping people accelerate that development process. There's a few platforms you might have heard of them or not. One is a company called Fictive. They
What is
recently
that,
got
Kevin? Can you
acquired
repeat that
for
kindly?
uh, Fictive,
Can you spell that? Okay.
FICTIV.
Fictive. No, I've not heard
So
of it. Yes.
so so it's a digital platform where if you have any kind of CAD drawings for metals, plastics, they can get you quotes within hours.
Mm.
And they have a distributed network of suppliers across Asia, across North America, across basically globally.
Mm.
And there's a few of these companies that exist now where if you need a housing, if you need parts fast, it could be CNC'd, you could do 3D printing, you have additive manufacturing, you have all these different options depending on the requirements of the product, where you can get housings, prototypes, low volume orders extremely fast.
Okay.
And for me, that also is one of the things I would encourage founders to do, is especially before an investment like an injection mold, where you're spending potentially 8 to 12 weeks, and it
Yes.
could be potentially tens of thousands of dollars for a final version of your product. These are the different technologies you should be using to test out, is it the right size? Is it the right feel? Is this the way that I want the product to be before I make the big investments? And
Correct.
and for me, these platforms are becoming more and more popular, and enabling founders to quickly iterate and test on the hardware side, so that they can get to a decision and final design faster.
Understood. That's very correct. I mean, right now the technologies have evolved so fast, Kevin, because I remember back about let's say roughly about 13 years back, when we were trying to build up a prototype, we just had the CNC machines coming on board, and you had to wait for ages till that entire machine drew it up. And now we have technologies that can actually generate the prototypes in, like, in a matter of seconds, what we exactly want. So that just, in my personal opinion, what that means is it's like generating an immediate go to market access. So it's just cutting down the time and making you ready to deploy as soon as possible. I've seen that ecosystem happening very fast, especially in China, and then very similarly in Hong Kong as well. That's fascinating to see, because I'm sure that will actually shift, like you said. That shifting will eventually encourage more entrepreneurs to come on board and then to become hardwarepreneurs down the line, because that will actually complement this entire ecosystem down the line. Kevin, if if an entrepreneur today that's here is interested, is like dreaming of building something of this particular nature, which includes hardware component, there are plenty of components that entrepreneur will have to come and face. For example, you'll have to work out the logistics, you'll have to work about clearance, and then you'll have to worry about quality control because you will not get the exact product sometimes. And once
Yeah.
they are all not sorted, you'll have to work around other ways to actually get that on board. So if you are to advise an entrepreneur in 2026 on saying, okay, let's say you're younger self, for someone of my age, let's say if you are planning to do something of this nature, follow these steps. If you were to list down those steps, what would they be, Kevin?
Yeah, another great question. I think my first one is talk to someone that's done it before. It doesn't need to be the exact product, but again, even like your experiences building hardware from scratch, I think that's one of the things a lot of people see a bunch of stuff on the internet, even just like the announcement of the new iPhone, recently. They see the marketing, they see how glamorous it is, and the technology, and think, oh, what if I do something like that? But but again, I think it's important to know what you're getting yourself into, um, and and someone that has experience in doing it first, um, because the reality is there's a lot of people that invest a lot of time, but also a lot of money into hardware that
Yes,
don't even get to market.
correct.
They could spend years developing a product that doesn't go to market. They could spend years investing their own money in other people's money without ever being able to launch. And so for me, it's one of those things. I think it's important for someone to understand what they're getting into first. In terms of the next step, which I think is equally as important, I call it a product requirement document. And that's actually starting to define what is it you're trying to build. What is the requirements of that device? What's a nice to have? Who are you building it for? What is the audience? Where are you trying to sell it? Really thinking about the business and the product holistically, and not just dreaming in the clouds. because because what that starts to do is then that can open up conversations with people that can help you build that product. And I get this all the time with founders, is that I could get on a call and they'll pitch me this great idea and say, hey, this is what I want to build. I'm like, okay, well, do you have a document outlining this? Like, I'll take notes, I'll try my best to remember what you want. But for me as a service provider, not just myself, but say it's a design firm, a prototype shop, a manufacturer, they operate off of product requirements. Give me exactly what you want to build, or tell me exactly what you want me to design, or tell me the scope of work that you want me to complete. And I think that's one thing that it takes a little bit getting used to if you're not familiar with it.
Yeah.
But the better you can do in terms of defining what you want, or defining how you want somebody to help you, then you can have more fruitful conversations. And I think once you start doing that, whether you are able to bring some people onto your team, or you outsource to a third party for that support, I think the last piece of advice I'd have is understand that adaptation is required. And that there will be things that go right, there will be things that go wrong, and it's about continuing to follow through and working through the process, being flexible, understanding that I get this all the time, where founders say, well, I've seen a product do this before, so why can't I do it? And a lot of times the answer is, well, if you have millions of dollars, there are certain things you can do. Or if you want your product to cost 5x your target, we can do that. But understanding the limitations of manufacturing processes, materials, and how people can support making that physical good to a quality grade that is, achievable for production and bringing it to market. So, these are some of the initial steps I think are really important. I could spend probably a whole hour just on vetting suppliers and what to look for, questions you should be asking, all those kind of things. But I know that we have limited time, so I don't know if we'll go into depth during this session on that. But I think that's also equally important, is understanding who you're doing business with and making sure you're qualifying the right partners to work with.
Sure, exactly, Kevin. I think the the expected answer um, was spot on, and that's exactly what I wanted to hear from yourself as well, because that would be the stepping stone for the entrepreneur to come and start with, because when an entrepreneur steps onto the stage and when he starts the entrepreneurial journey, to be very honest, there's no guidebook, there is no manual.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's, to be very honest, it's I would say very comfortably more than 60% of the work is guesswork, because they are trying to enter into an uncharted domain. And when you try to explain that concept to another person, it's very difficult to get a positive feedback, simply because, Kevin, the other person has not achieved what we want, so
that's right.
they cannot compliment on the thought process. So oftentimes entrepreneurs get disheartened and challenged when they hear negative comments, and when they hear negative commotion, simply because you go and reach out to a person who has not had that experience in the first place. And I oftentimes encourage entrepreneurs to do enough research and to be very open minded, and I always encourage them to be comfortable, to be very comfortable when they hear a no, and when they hear you can't do it, when they hear it's going to be very difficult, I always encourage them to be very comfortable with it, because down the line,
Yep.
you should be comfortable. When you hear a no from this ear, you should be able to hear a yes from this ear, Kevin. That's exactly how you should build it. I mean, that's the level I am built with, so I just try to share that knowledge as much as possible. Now, Kevin, if you take the modern society and if you take the modern education system, uh, it's, to be very honest, a very traditional based mechanism. So you generate people who are good at reading stuff, memorizing stuff, and then generating outputs. And if you take the South Asian as well as the Asian continent specifically, you find a lot of people who are capable of memorizing concepts rather than creating outputs. So I actually have no idea how we can change this education system in the first place. I'm not even trying to get into that space because it's a whole different mess. But uh,
Yeah.
when we talk about the future generation, which is the generation that's upcoming and the generation that's about to come in the next 15 to 20 years, uh, I think it's our responsibility to give them a small heads up, and then for us to become the lighthouse, to shed some light on certain paths that they can actually pursue, because eventually they will be the ones who will be taking over. So, Kevin, my question to you is, uh, right now we have so much of degrees. You have degree programs in mechanical, electronics, software, systems, architectural, so on and so forth. But in the next, I would say, very comfortable for the next 10 to 15 years, in your perspective, Kevin, what would you recommend the youngsters to pursue so that it will be of value 10-15 years after? Because if we are to, because I often see that mistake, Kevin, because we say, okay, now you need to follow AI, because AI is hot now. We have absolutely no idea how AI will take over in the next 15 years. We have no clue. So
Yeah.
I mean, it might be unfair for me to raise this, to ask you this question. I might be putting you in trouble, so forgive me for that. But I just, because I just want for us to make a smart prediction for the next 10, 15 years, Kevin, because that way our lighthouse effect will actually navigate these entrepreneurs to learn something that will be effective in the next 10, 15 years to come, Kevin. Kevin, what would that be in your experience, Kevin?
So I have three kids, 9, 7, and 3. So I'll answer this in a way looking at their future and kind of just my personal view. First, I think I firmly believe that not everyone should be an entrepreneur, and and there are people, their personality, their aspirations, the way of learning could be much more advantageous to joining a company and playing a specific role within that company. And I like to think that's perfectly fine. I don't think that is going to change. And that could be engineering, design, hardware, creative industries in general. But for those that are entrepreneurs, what I would say is I'd like to think of AI more as a tool, and similar to, say, a calculator. Like, how can a calculator augment the way that you do business? And again, with AI, it's more than just that and more complex. But I think it's about understanding, for you as an entrepreneur, what are your strengths? Are you an entrepreneur with more of an engineering background? Are you an entrepreneur more in a marketing background? And maybe AI plays a role in educating you and guiding you on areas where you're not as much as an expert. But in addition to AI, I think in general, what I'm seeing as a more broader trend is really adapting to the fact that you can have a global workforce now. And, even some of the startups I work with, it might only be 4 or 5 people, but it might be someone in India, connected to someone in the US, connected to someone in China, connected to someone, in Korea. And it's not about just, who's within your town, who's within your country. It's about finding and connecting with the right people to support that part of your business. And I think, what I'm seeing more is that being able to adapt and bring together these different pieces, this is going to create a unique recipe where it doesn't matter what it is you're trying to build. If you have the right people and the right business model, you have a shot of doing something unique and making it. And I think, with the way technology is going, the way that communication is going, it's just opening up all these borders to just have a global organization, even as a startup, just with a handful of people. So I think understanding that you have that flexibility and you don't need to go through that traditional model of I sell my idea, I raise a bunch of money, I hire a bunch of people to sit in my office at X location, and this is the only way to build a startup, I think is important.
That actually falls in line. I'm pretty sure that that thought process would definitely reflect the generations to come, Kevin. The statement where you made, where it says use AI as a tool, it is very promising, because right now, oftentimes AI is misused, and I think, I would say, uh, AI is grossly underrated as we speak, because people assume AI is ChatGPT, right? So writing a
Yeah.
prompt, getting an output, people assume that this is AI, but it's not the case. I mean, if you dive a little bit back into the logic, the neural networks, as well as how the tokens work and how it can actually generate the output that we want, it's to be honest, it's a whole fascinating world to step into. So using it as a tool to get to the next step that we really want in our life, in our career, in the startup, would actually be the way to go forward. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Kevin. Question to tag along with that same thought process. Uh, you can be an exceptional engineer, you can be an exceptional developer, you could be an exceptional person who's having an idea to build it into the first place. But oftentimes, I've seen firsthand, Kevin, uh, entrepreneurs are unable to communicate what they really want. And as a result, I've seen hundreds and thousands of dollars going down the drain simply because you couldn't express what you really want in the first place. So sometimes it can even be a misunderstanding between the investor in the first place, because you pitch something to an investor, and sometimes you pitch it to the investor. The idea that you pitch to the investor is not exactly what you had in mind. So the investor has something else in mind. So so this goes forwards and backwards, and then there's a investor crash down the line. And sometimes the investor puts in money expecting you to build something you promised, but down the line the entrepreneur is actually going at a different direction. I've seen situations, I've seen legal battles, I've been in boards to assist certain scenarios, I've been in multiple conflict resolution scenarios when it comes to these situations. Kevin, uh, what do you think as a vital component that should be inculcated in an entrepreneur mindset, coming in as an entrepreneur who is being born, let's say, for the 2026 year? What elements do you see in addition to those skills? What people skills do you think that an entrepreneur should hone um, in the upcoming years, Kevin?
So there's two things that come to mind for me. One, which I almost mentioned earlier, around a product requirements document. The best way within hardware to communicate, have it in writing.
Right.
And it's so important in terms of what the product is, specifications, requirements, functionality. It should be so detailed that at the end of the day, it should just be, did it meet that requirement? Yes or no. And you should be able to measure that requirement. So I think that's, the first thing that comes to mind, especially with hardware. And then the second part of it is beyond what's written down is, whether it is an investor or whether it's communicating with the factory or even your internal team. I think always trying to have conversations with those parties and explain to them why. Not just it is XYZ, but it is XYZ because it has to meet this specification because of this regulation, or because this is for a patient in a hospital that needs XYZ, or this is for a consumer in a hot market where temperatures could go above 40°C. But again, I think being able to communicate and remind yourself that although you might have all this information in your head as the founder and entrepreneur, the team or those third parties might not have that level of detail. So just always trying to articulate the why, I think, also helps quite a bit.
Right, exactly. So I would also echo on those exact points, because that communication has to happen, and it has to be crystal clear. In its absence, I'm definitely sure you will actually walk into an haywire and then create a whole lot of mess. Kevin, this is sort of maybe a directed question towards you, in an investor perspective. That is for me to understand how the market trends work, as well as how receptive the world is towards upcoming technology, so on and so forth. Kevin, hypothetically, if you are to invest, let's say, if you are to invest $1 million right now,
Hmm.
what would be the product that you would invest that you would see as hot right now for the next 5 to 10 years? And can you tell me why they so?
That's a tough one because although I have worked for an investment group with a pretty broad thesis, I'm not, I'd say, a traditional investor myself. Um, I don't know that there's a specific product category I would invest in.
What does your gut say?
My own.
I mean, your gut feeling that that if you were to, let's say, if you were to bet on a horse, and what with your experience, what would your gut say, saying, okay, this domain would be actually of this nature in the next 5 to 10, 15 years, or not so much. Let's say in the next coming 5 to 10 years, it should be some domains that I would actually bet on, because I would like to know based on your experience, so that then that message will actually be of some value to the community. Okay, Kevin, that's the idea. Yeah.
I mean, I'll say this. Throughout my career, where I have the most experience is around consumer electronics and consumer goods, connected devices. I don't think that's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think there's always opportunities in that space to build new brands, new product experiences, not high risk, where you're necessarily creating a brand new technology. For me personally, I don't know, investing $1 million in AI can actually do much when,
Yes.
The big guys are raising, 100 million plus per round.
Yes.
So because of all of my experience in that space, I'd be more inclined to find an interesting product, and it doesn't necessarily need to be even something global.
Mm.
I actually think it's very interesting to think about more regional brands, and thinking about, if you understand a specific gap in the market in Sri Lanka for a product, you understand that market really well. And there are similar devices, maybe in other regions, but just one that doesn't fit for your specific market. I'd say that'd be the type of project I would like to invest in, or that I could probably see myself investing in. And that's the other thing that I find with entrepreneurs is oftentimes they compare themselves to these multi-million-dollar national, global brands. And in reality, you need to take it one step at a time. And, so, yeah, I think if I were to put money in, it would definitely be some type of consumer electronic, consumer good, where I can leverage all the relationships I have. And I'd be even more interested in how it's adapting to a specific region or user experience at a maybe unique price point that people haven't seen before. Because I think more and more you have those capabilities in hardware to do that through unique and authentic brands and grow it from there.
Kevin, just to follow up on that thought process,
Yeah.
since you put it on the table as a preference to consumer electronics coming into the market, since that's your area of expertise and your domain, if there's an entrepreneur who is interested in or maybe thinking of building a consumer brand, let's say like you correctly put, in a regional area, let's say in Sri Lanka or in India or Bangladesh or Indonesia, in Vietnam, right? If they want to go by that process, what would be the easiest for them to tag along to? Do they have to come and start prototyping in Hong Kong or in China? What would be the easiest for them to deploy, Kevin?
I mean, it really depends on the product, but I always like to understand what's on the market today. And even through sites like Alibaba, you can get connected to suppliers and get samples of products that are already on the market. And so I think understanding what's on the market and what's already built, doing a little bit of market research and understanding even what the price of those devices look like, the limitations, what you'd want to be different. For me, I think that's always a great starting point. And then from there, really focusing on how you're going to make that product and brand unique. What problem are you solving with this product?
Got it, got it. And that clears up a lot of things, and I think that would be the way to go forward as well. Especially, I mean, eventually, irrespective of whatever the product, like you said, it just narrows down and it just attends to a multiple areas of the products that they really want to bring into the picture. Kevin, this question is a little bit off from what we just developed, what we discussed. That is about legislatives and protocol. Now, if you are a consumer who is not a consumer, customer who is trying to order something from a supplier, and I've oftentimes been, and I have been a witness to, I have been a witness as well as a victim to a couple of times as well. You order it from a supplier, and the supplier fails to deliver the exact product. Sometimes the delivered product is with defects, and you have absolutely no clue. I mean, it's true that we have. I mean, right now that mismatch has gone down to a significant level. I mean, the buyers as well as the sellers are trying to be genuine as much as possible. But do you think that it would have been better if more legislation and more protocol was introduced to save the customer as well as to maintain a high standard of suppliers? What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
I'm not sure how much can be done from a legislative perspective. For me, again, it always goes back to what is communicated in terms of what the product will do, and what the supplier has agreed that product will do, right? And so if it's within the requirements, the defined requirements, and it's not meeting that expectation, then I believe that supplier has a right to either provide a refund or restock or, make up the difference for their mistake. But I'll give you a great example with one of my clients a few months ago, where it was something small, where on the outer housing, their logo is printed on a sticker, and the sticker is then positioned at the center of the device, and it goes through final quality control, and they ship the product out. And my client says a few weeks ago, the logo, it looks a little bit crooked. It doesn't look like it's exactly straight. And again, this is where you have to go back and look. And I said, well, what are the requirements? And he said, well, what do you mean? and I said, well, this is the thing. This is the part about quality control. This is the part about a product, even to the level of you need to be able to say, it could be 0.5 millimeter. It could be 1 centimeter. However you want to measure it, you need to have an upper and lower limit to, is this sticker in the exact position it should be? Okay. And you should have a requirement that you can measure to say, yes, this has passed the test, or no, it hasn't. And this is the part that's really hard to describe to founders. You don't know what you don't know. He never knew that he needed to create a specification for exactly where that sticker should be placed until he got the product and said, I'm not sure if this is right. So again, for me, it's not so much about legislation. It's more about how you're defining everything with that supplier. And then I usually don't get in a lot on the legal side if there are disputes. But I know that the few times that I've had these types of situations, it always comes back to what does the contract say, and where in the contract does it say I've either met or not met that specification?
Exactly. I think that's very wise of us to get into it. Like you correctly said, if we can communicate our requirement precisely, uh, I would say 98% of the time we would get the correct product. Uh, and if it's our miscommunication, I think it's a responsibility of the entrepreneur or the founder to bear it, because they were unable to communicate that in the first place. I mean, at that point, it might be wrong to say it, but that's how the world works. I mean, like you say this is, you need to have this, let's say 5 millimeters to your right, 5 millimeters to your left. That's what they produce, because
Yep.
they produce in mass quantities, and
Yeah.
they will try their best to stick to the specification, like you correctly said. So Kevin, to bring this entire discussion to an end, I would like to keep this particular question to you, like that is, uh, what would your message be to the young upcoming entrepreneurs who are going to build their companies that are going to last for, let's say, 5-10 years in the upcoming? What would your message be to them? Because I've seen oftentimes, like you correctly said, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Everyone should not be an entrepreneur
Yeah.
in the first place. It's totally okay to do an 8 to 5 job, and because you're happy with it, right? Because I advise the
Right.
students to do that, because the pain that you are going to endure down the line of an entrepreneurial journey is something that you can never imagine. You cannot put it in words. So I would encourage the students to not be an entrepreneur in the first place. Be happy with where you were, and then try to become become an entrepreneur when you are okay, when you have some funds and you want to do something new. Look at it. I mean, that's what I often says. But I would like to know what your message is to the community and to the entrepreneurs in the upcoming society. Kevin, what would that be?
Yeah, I think there's a few parts to it. One being understanding that it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. Nobody has a perfect record. Nobody has built an amazing startup or unicorn without some adversity. So understanding that there's movies and there's all kinds of media glorifying being a founder and CEO and entrepreneur. And if that's your passion, I'm not going to discourage you from doing it. But understanding that you need to be able to take the hits and get back up. And it's, I think, those that are willing to do that, and the ones that are willing to continue to grind and build without getting discouraged easily. Those are the entrepreneurs that are going to make it. And it's about constantly learning. Even for me now, it's not only about me growing and building my business and building off of what I've done in my career in the past, but it's continuing to learn, continuing to adapt, and understanding that the world is evolving, and so I also need to evolve with it.
Right. So, Kevin, let me thank you once again for tagging along, and then thank you again for spending a lot of your valued time to give back to the community, to give back to the entrepreneurs. And I strongly believe that we were able to initiate a spark, and down the line, I believe a message will be taken by the community, and there would be some people, some entrepreneurs who would take this message, and eventually, if they are trying to get the most out of it, I mean, that is the expectation of this. So thank you once again for accepting my invitation and being with me, Kevin. I look forward to having another discussion in the future when this platform is built and the ecosystem is built, and I'll also be visiting Hong Kong and China. My plan is to visit China by next week, April. That's the plan. But if I'm hopping that way, Hong Kong would be a entry point, because I'll be planning to visit Cyberport in the first place. So I'll definitely give you a shout when I get there. Uh, I would love to see you. So that's it, Kevin. Thank you once again for being with me. Uh, then bye bye, Kevin.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Right.